Hell yeah. This is max depth. You can do whatever you want on max depth.
Love it.
Well, welcome. If we're starting. I mean, I forgot to tell you. We can edit anything out. So you can say whatever the fuck you want and we can cut it out.
Do I need to clip this on?
Yeah, I mean, you can... Some people go like this. I like holding it because it makes me feel like an actual interviewer, like something like this.
I might just hold it too.
It's pretty chill like this.
I kind of like this.
It's a pretty chill vibe. But fucking cheers, buddy.
This is a nice setup.
Right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right.
Cheers.
Doing Molly tomorrow.
Actually, I can already tell that I need to clip this on because there's
Yeah,
going to be
clip it on.
times where I've got it like too far away or something.
You pull it like this.
Does that work like that?
Yeah, that's probably perfect. I was thinking we could go, well, you just said you were talking about people not taking you seriously, and I totally understand that because I feel like every time I talk to people like about this that don't know me at all, or like when I cold email people about like trying to get people on here, whether it's like people at the university or something, they're like, oh, an 18-year-old kid. Why would I want to talk to him? Like he has nothing to say, like, or like he doesn't have a platform, he doesn't have people. So it's difficult, especially at the early stage, like right now for me, for anyone to take me seriously.
To build the platform up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard to even start because like you have to start somewhere, and like when you're starting from zero, it's difficult to even like begin laying the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's one thing that we've dealt with when we were starting to talk to the loan office about starting up this business. They were asking us if we have any experience owning businesses or if we've ever started any businesses up. But we're 27 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, no, but how do I gain experience if no one will let me get the experience and actually start something?
Yeah, it's like when you're applying for that job and it's like you have to have 3 years of experience, but it's like this is my first job. I was in college. Like
Exactly.
I didn't have any time to get experience. So how am I going to get a job in the first place to gain experience to then go on and have more jobs?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people that are looking to hire people, it's like they're taking themselves too seriously or something. Mm-hmm. Or they're putting too much emphasis on what the role is. When really, I think in most circumstances, if you get somebody that's young and driven into a position, they're going to do much better than somebody that's been in the field for 30 years and is like just trying to make it another 20 so they can retire or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the young people have something to prove.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they want to have that recommendation from the last job that they can move on and keep building with it.
Yep.
And it's like the people that are already in the field, like they've like already kind of done their time. They know how like shitty the day in and day out is. Mm-hmm. Like they don't have like the young like dream eyes that you have like when you're first going into it, like all the potential, all the possibility. Like if I was hiring, like of course you want, like ideally if you were hiring, you want someone with experience, but you have to factor in what we're saying. That people just don't have experience right off the gate. So you have to like, you kind of have to take a chance on some people.
And I don't know, I feel like if the roles were reversed, like if we go back to like a loan office or something like that, to me, if I'm somebody that's in the position of giving loans out and I ask the question, have you ran businesses before in the past? And they say yes, to me that's almost more of a concern because it's like, okay, you've ran businesses, but now you need a loan. Mm-hmm. So how did those other businesses do? Mm-hmm. Like, obviously not great if you're trying to come to a loan office and obtain a loan.
Interesting. Yeah, you could take that one of two ways though. I mean, because obviously like I think they're thinking like if you've started a business and whether it went like even if you failed at it, at least you have some experience like failing at it, because there's something to be said like you gain something from failing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is like,
I agree with that too.
It's scary to fail though.
But yeah, and even then you still have to give people the opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it
all starts with just like giving people the opportunity to get into something new.
Yeah, that's
and go
like,
for it.
But like what I think like with education, jobs, like I don't know how I would structure it would be like equality of opportunity above everything. Like maybe not everyone's the same like level of intellectual whatever. Like maybe people aren't really like all that equal in their actual ability, but give everyone the same shot, let them compete for it fairly, and then see who rises to the top.
Yeah.
Like that's such a problem with like schools and shit. Like schools naturally have the best teacher. Like school A has the best teachers, best resources, best access to technology, best everything, best college preparatory things, counselors, everything. And then the school B has nothing.
Yep.
And then they're like, that's not equal starting out. And then over generations, same neighborhoods.
Yep. And that's the problem with like our elite schools in this country, and how it's. And I mean, firstly, that's the problem with elite schools, right? Is that not everyone has the opportunity to attend these schools. Like if you're an inner city kid, you don't have the same ability to learn certain things or the same technology when you're learning.
And people make the case like, oh, it's easier to get into school if you're like a minority or something like that. But you got to think like the majority of the kids in like a New York City inner city school. The majority
if you break it down by capita, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And that's, to like an even further extent, that's the same thing. That's one of the biggest problems I see with like what it takes to get into politics in this country, right?
Yeah.
Like you pretty much have to come from a place of wealth.
You have to have a name. Like you have to have a name starting out almost.
Yeah. You have to attend a certain Ivy League school or something. You have to have this sort of, resume behind you.
Yeah, and even if it's a family resume, like even if it's a name, think about like so many like presidents are just the sons or grandsons of past presidents.
Absolutely.
Like the Adams.
And that's the
come on.
The major problem I think with that is that it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about with social media and stuff last night, about how what you see on social media doesn't give you a clear representation of a majority of what the world is, right? It gives you just kind of like a little
like a
small
low resolution image.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to me, that's the problem with politics, is that we have these people that come from these privileged backgrounds that are speaking for everyone, when really they have a very narrow viewpoint of what it's like to be an average person in the United States. And I think that we would see a lot of policies that would benefit people as a whole more if we were to give the opportunity to somebody that came from an inner city or something. And I think that's why, I mean, this is obviously just a personal opinion, but in my opinion, that's why I think Barack Obama is one of the best presidents that we've ever had, is because although he came from a degree of wealth and had some opportunities and stuff, he still was a Chicago kid, right? And saw both sides of things. And he was kind of a spokesman for, the underdog in a lot of ways. Whereas in the last presidency, we have Donald Trump, who was born with millions of dollars into his bank account. And it's not to say that people with millions of dollars don't go through struggles, because...
Or that they can't be a valid president.
Absolutely. But there is, if you're not willing to step outside of your bubble and view it from all points of view, that's exactly what happens. And that's pretty much, by definition, who Donald Trump has been his entire life. He's been in wealth. He's never stepped out from it. He's been kind of just like a golden child his entire life, And so I don't really think his viewpoints
are representative of...
No, and
the
which is why it's mind-blowing that so much of the underprivileged side of our nation...
Well, it's exactly what we were talking about last night, because he's literally playing to them. He's saying exactly what he knows they want to hear. And they eat it up.
Absolutely.
They eat it up.
Totally.
And it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's like...
Mind-blowing.
well, this is kind of just slightly unrelated, but like if I could have a wish, one of the ones near the top would be for people to more readily step outside of their own viewpoint, because I think it does so much good. Like attacking a problem from like looking at multiple angles, seeing it, like mapping it out. Like you have to look at that from every angle. But most people, when they think about a problem, I feel like they see their one viewpoint, they look at it, and then they kind of make a decision about it just based off that, and then they kind of can make a conclusion about it, and then move on.
And I think that's where you know, the rise of the internet and social media could be used in a positive light. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that everybody on it wants to show themselves as what's the most liked thing. But like as an example, when I went to Haiti, my senior year of high school, mm-hmm. there was a little boy there who was asking us for money one of the days. And, you know, I didn't, obviously senior in high school, and I didn't come from like a background of a lot of wealth. And it cost us a lot of money to get there. He couldn't understand why I couldn't provide him with money. And then our translator explained to us that they were talking back and forth, and our translator explained to us that his viewpoint on America in the United States
was that everyone
had money. And what he was basing that on was something that he had seen. It was like a little cartoon where there was like a street full of money, and that's what that was what he thought the United States was like. There's money everywhere, like it's just up for the grabbing. And I think that's where, you know, the internet could do a better job in social media. If we were just to show our authentic selves and our true selves, then people in other countries would be able to get a better grasp of it. But instead, and it's the same with the news, right? It's like we're putting out something that's going to get the most attention, the most clicks, and in turn raise the most amount of money. It's going to, like, increasing clicks is directly correlated to more profitability for these companies. Where, you know, maybe if we, instead of focusing on the worst thing that's happened today on the news,
but that's the problem. That's what gets the clicks.
Exactly. But if we
the
could
extremes get the clicks.
If we could focus more on the middle ground.
But no one gives a shit about the middle.
And that's the absolute problem.
No one cares about the middle.
Yeah. I do.
Yeah. The middle's, I mean
that's the kind of, you know, that's the kind of things that get me the most fired up is
the middle.
Yeah, talking to people that are, you know, just like me, that, you know, come from just a normal background. And even I was privileged, obviously. I'm white.
Yeah.
I'm male. My parents have made money. You know, they weren't wealthy by any means, but I was never necessarily struggling for things growing up. But that's kind of that middle ground is what mostly builds up the United States, and seeing stories of that is far more interesting to me than hearing about, you know,
the latest crisis,
the latest celebration.
Yeah, it's like all these, because the U.S. is, like, I mean, besides like some like the Scandinavian countries and some countries in Europe, like, we're doing way better than the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Objectively. So it's fair for like some little kid in Haiti that drinks like dirty water every day, doesn't have access to clean water, has like a shitty little tin hut roof type thing that he
to have
has
that
to call
viewpoint
his house.
of the United States is
it's an accurate view.
Yeah.
And it's true. But then it's like all these people flood in from like cartel areas in Mexico, like civil wars in Central and South America, like dictator presidents, all this shit going on that we never see because we just block it all out because we're the United States and we don't have to clear it out. But they come in, if they make it to the United States, which is so rare. There's so many hundreds of thousands of people like trying to get here when they have this beautiful idea of what America is, like the land of the free, home of the brave, like land of opportunity. if they get here, if they manage to get through the impossible process of getting here, they get shit on instantly. You're an immigrant. We fucking hate you. Get out of our country.
And that's because
that's gonna be a soundbite.
and that's because from our side of things, we don't see any of that. And those are the things that, as a privileged nation, those are the things that we should be covering, right? Like today, the biggest thing in the news, I mean, I got a notification on my phone, and I don't follow any of the gossip things. I'm pretty sure it was like the Washington Post or something, and it was that Khloe Kardashian and Tristan Thompson broke up again.
Awesome.
And that
thank God. Honestly, thank God.
Well, yeah. But that is the biggest piece of news coming out of the United States today. when there are so many things that happen globally today that means such a greater deal than that. You know, some kid got his first chance to get health care in one of these, you know, untouched regions today or something like that.
It definitely feels good. I did a thing kind of like your Haiti thing last year. I went to Peru and built like a library situation, cleared out a bunch of like heavy logs that had been built up, cleared out an area, helped set up like a place for a bathroom, like all that stuff up in this like remote village in the mountains. And it's like so rewarding doing that because it's these little kids running around with like little baby alpacas and women, and they've never left this village before. It's just them posted up there. Like I've had a couple experiences like that, and it's really like helped me be able to get out of my head, like get out of this giant ass house I'm living in, and see that, okay, the vast majority of people live nothing like you. You are so beyond lucky, you little shit. You don't even realize it. If you don't wake up in the morning and like realize how lucky you are,
have
you're
a
doing something
level
wrong.
of gratitude right when you wake up.
Yeah,
and that's why this whole thing with, you know, these incentives for people to get vaccinated for COVID, and how our level has just completely plateaued everywhere with vaccination rates, is mind-blowing to me. Because when I was in Haiti, I was working in a medical facility that was set up there, and set up by a hospital out of Tallahassee, Florida, and, you know, nothing like a medical center that we'd see here.
Yeah,
you know,
makeshift.
it was a makeshift center. There were people that walked for miles and miles just to get basic medical treatment, you know?
Yeah.
And they walked miles and miles just from word of mouth that there was a medical center that was finally set up somewhere.
Yeah, and think about all the times that they walked and there wasn't any medical center. They heard the rumor.
And here, you know, we've been dealing with the global pandemic, and here in the United States, you can get a vaccine on virtually any corner, you know, or if you're in a city, they're all over the place. If you're in a rural area, it's 5 minutes from your home, and we're incentivizing people to get it done by $1 million reward. Somebody's going to win $1 million reward, and it's just gross. Like, it's disgusting.
Yeah, those are the people that have never like had that experience.
Yeah. And that's why it's really easy for people in the United States to think that this is some sort of great hoax or something. And that comes directly as a result from the privilege that we've all had growing up here. Whereas in other countries, they've been dealing with toxic, you know, horrible diseases like Ebola in Africa. And
just to name one.
Yeah.
Just all the time. There's horrible shit going on
Constantly.
that people have to deal with that we never see. Just constantly.
Yeah. And this is the first time that as an entire populace, the United States has really faced something like that, at least in hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And we can't even, we don't even want to believe that it's true. It's like, not us. No. And the weird thing about that is that there wasn't all this blowback, I feel like, on COVID when it broke out in other countries. it was like, as Americans, we were like, oh, well, of course, there's another pandemic that's happening in all these countries. And then it comes over here, and all of a sudden everyone's like, no, it's fake. The whole thing is fake. But it only happened once it hit home soil that we had that mindset.
And because it was fake, it just was able to get so bad.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right,
We've done a terrible job.
Yeah. I feel like we kind of did such a terrible job because we were so confident in our abilities. Like that, it's almost like we had like a false superiority confidence complex where we thought we could do anything because we've done so much, we've won so many. Like, I think the key to building confidence is doing difficult things and succeeding at them over and over again, and then like when you do another difficult thing, like when you need that confidence, you're like, all right, well, I've done like 10 shitty things before. You have good data. You've done this thing before. You're like, all right, well, I've done all this hard stuff. Now I'm going to be able to do this again. Like, most likely, I'm going to be able to do this hard thing again. It's like the U.S. has won so many times over. At least it seems like it now. Like, that's the narrative. Like, and it's kind of true.
We don't lose.
And it's kind of true that we don't lose. We're America the Great. Like, we don't think that anything can take us out. And that is that's a giant problem. Because there are things that can take us out. And especially if we're not looking, they'll come and sweep us out from under our feet.
Yep.
And they won't be merciful.
And
they want our spot.
Yeah, and to a certain amount of the United States, we've seen that and we've realized it from this pandemic. Mm-hmm. But then there's still such a great percentage of our nation that hasn't taken it that way at all. To so many people, we are still exactly what you were just explaining. We're untouchable.
Yeah, but how do you not see it at this point?
Sheer ignorance.
That's what I think. Like, but that's why you need equality of opportunity. Because not saying that those people won't succeed, because a lot of them will for whatever reason, whether it's their openness and agreeableness and conscientiousness and wanting to do, and whatever position they're in. But like, a lot of them aren't going to be able to succeed at the same level someone else would have if they're given the same opportunity.
Right.
So it's like, we shouldn't expect for everybody to be at the same spot, for everybody to make the same amount of money. Like, it makes sense why some people are billionaires and some people have no money, just based on their abilities and what they were born into.
Absolutely. And that's, to touch on that point a little bit more, I think, like, for instance, we're planning this business right now, and we're trying to obtain.
Tell people what it is. Shout it out for the one person listening.
It's a bar music venue, and here in Portland, nearly every bar and music venue has either failed or had a great deal of suffering throughout this pandemic. And it takes people that actually believe in what's happening and what's happened over the last year plus to make sure that doesn't happen again and that our economy isn't affected by it. And so that's why in our business plan, we are setting it up in a way to where we can survive something like that happens again. We're making sure that we have the ability to do, a lot of these businesses had to shift their entire format, like with, only dine-in restaurants having to figure out ways to make takeout available. Mm-hmm. And we're planning in a way to where that's not going to be the case. We're going to be, if this were, hopefully it doesn't happen, but
hypothetically, if
COVID rears its head again, or another COVID strain, or
you don't know
anything.
What's gonna happen.
Exactly. You have to be prepared for it. And I think that that's on a grander scheme, not just from like a business perspective, but societally, we should be learning from this right now. And
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Putting things in place so that we are prepared for it. And that is something that it's quite evident that although, like we said, in Africa and these third world countries around the world, these things have been happening since time has been happening, since the human race has been around. there have been awful things happening in less fortunate areas in the world. And as the United States, we have this idea that we're bigger and better than that, and we haven't learned from any of the things that other people have suffered from. We didn't have the foresight to say, although Africa is much poorer than we are and doesn't have the sustainability that we have, this could happen here. And so our government missed the ball completely. They should have been able to set something up, you know, and that's our infectious disease, you know, portion of the government, whatever it's called. Yeah, we didn't have anything in.
Want to hear something crazy? They knew. The infectious disease portion of the government knew that it was going to be I guess they didn't know how bad it was going to be, but they knew that it was coming, and they fucking sent out memos, and then the higher people in the government, like I don't know who saw it. The people you don't know about in the government probably were just like, all right, let's just not tell anyone about that because that's going to cause a panic, and then the economy is going to go down instead of planning for it. Like any practical person would do. Any logical, practical person would obviously plan for an upcoming attack. Mm-hmm. Dude, think about if you're going to war with someone and like the enemy's coming. You get like you have a portion of your team, your army that is set up to tell you when the enemy's coming, and then they're like, "Yo, the enemy's coming! The enemy's coming!" and you do nothing.
Well, that's
you're like, "Yo, let's relax." People are gonna freak out.
And that's the laughable thing, right? Is that we've had the Civil War, one major war that happened on U.S. soil.
Between U.S. citizens and people and slaves, a little bit too.
But it touched U.S. soil, right?
Yeah.
None of the other wars that have ever happened have touched U.S. soil
in such like an intimate way, because of course, like both world wars, we were involved and we lost citizens
and we
felt it, but it wasn't in our homeland.
Right.
I know what you're saying.
And yet we have such a strong military complex. We have the strongest military in the world. We spend billions of dollars on it every single year, every month.
Every day.
And so if you were to take the amount of diseases that have come up in the last couple hundred years that have wiped out huge populations of people, I'm sure it outweighs the amount of wars and the people that wars have taken out tenfold.
Yeah.
Yet we haven't learned from that and built the exact same program for infectious diseases.
Yeah.
But we spend all this money on our military.
It's almost like we do that because it's more like visual, like almost more like tangible. It's more real to us. Like we understand what a military attack would be like. We don't know what a global warming attack would be like, or we do, but people like
they can't
feel it. They can't see it. Yeah, exactly. So it's like we only are good at stuff that is right in front of us.
Yeah.
And so like and it's like if there's an invisible enemy, it's like people like I said, like this invisible enemy that's killing all these people, like we are just like, we have no idea what to do.
If we put COVID in terms of like, if it were to have been announced to the United States that this was like a biological weapon or something.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Everyone would have believed it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone would have jumped on board.
Yeah.
And been absolutely frightened of it and done anything they could have because they would have viewed themselves as patriotic in the sense that they were fighting against this biological warfare. But the idea that this, and I don't think that we've really found out how COVID was made. I know that they've gone back into studying the idea that it could have been lab created. And I think it'll be some time before we have all the answers for that. But if that would have been the narrative from the beginning, it's crazy to think how many people would have viewed that as, ammunition to get the vaccine.
But it's funny because Trump kind of did that. He said it's the China virus.
I know.
So we kind of did that in a way.
Yeah. But all that showed was our ability to hate a particular race based on misconceptions.
But it's kind of valid because, I mean, not like the hatred towards Chinese or Asian people, but it makes sense that if a problem originated somewhere, you would be like, yo, there's a problem in that one place that it started from. What's up with that? Maybe not like, I hate you away.
It's the idea that we don't know exactly how it was started. That's the reason that.
Is it not confirmed that it started from the wet market, jumping from animal to animal, and then jump under human? That's being debated? I don't know.
That I think that's
what I've heard.
What most people are pointing towards.
But it could be anything, of course.
The last thing I heard, and it's been such an overwhelming year plus, right?
Yeah.
Keeping up with all the COVID news, not having anything else to really keep up with, being stuck at home. But one of the last things I did see was that the laboratory in Wuhan was under investigation again. The Biden administration was launching another investigation because I think that there were maybe questions that it could have been lab created.
Wow. Sorry, this is totally off topic, but like during the Trump presidency, I heard about Trump every single day. I haven't heard much about Biden at all.
You have to search it out. It's back to the way that it was. You have to be an informed American, someone that cares to you've got to search these things out, and that's, I think, part of the problem with the Trump presidency and all the hate it created and all the angst between our nation is because it was so forefront. All the tweets,
watched one of
everything.
Those. I watched it because I consume almost no news, which is pretty. It's kind of bad. I'm like woefully uninformed about what's going on in the world, just because honestly, I just think it's all so biased. Like there's almost no media source I can trust. Like I don't really know how to consume information.
Well, yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about. It's
because I see
capitalist in nature.
I just don't understand how people don't see it. Like as soon as I turn on the news, whether it's NBC or Fox, like whatever it is, I tangibly feel like I'm getting a narrative fucking shoved down my throat.
Oh yeah.
As soon as I turn on the TV, I'm like, this is a game show.
Which is why,
like, this is a sporting event. This feels like a freaking football game.
Exactly, and that's why I think it's so important to, like Brittany and I, we watch. Do
you switch back and forth?
We'll switch back and forth. We'll tune into Fox sometimes when, especially during this whole COVID thing. You know, it was interesting to see. All right, well, what's Fox News saying about this? Mm-hmm. What's MSNBC saying about this? And that was the most difficult thing, is that it was completely polar. There was no middle ground. There was never one thing that they agreed on. But it's the
same... Okay, so there's external reality, like, out there that's actually happening. And then it's all of our individual little, like, interpretations of what's going on. And that's being affected by the sources of information that we consume. So it's a giant problem that these media companies and all of social media, basically any way that you consume news, like was it you that was saying that like a lot of people get like their main source of news is through Instagram?
Social media, yeah.
Which is just like crazy to me, because I'm so far removed from it. Like today, like now, it's difficult for me to even imagine that.
Well, and the problem is that,
which goes back to what we were saying before. But
I can get on Instagram right now and make a new handle and call it
anything
United States News, right? And people can subscribe to that, and they feel like they're getting the news.
And then if you get 100,000 followers, then you have immense credibility, and people
you become a reliable source in people's minds.
And you aren't.
No, and that's why, to me, one of the scariest things that's happened throughout this entire COVID thing for me is seeing the percentage of people that don't believe in scientific research, because by and far the one thing that we can really rely on, especially in a situation like this is
You can't not believe in
scientific
science.
research. And especially if you're viewing a scientific report that's peer-reviewed by multiple sources,
Yeah, but like, how many people are actually like reading peer-reviewed scientifically?
they're
like,
not. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, that's one of the main reasons I've moved away from social media as of late, is because I was getting too frustrated with these narratives that were being pushed out there. And I would scroll through and I would see, friends of mine from high school saying these absurd things that just had no basis. And that's what I started doing.
That's a problem with freedom of speech.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want.
Exactly.
Essentially.
And people will believe it. And in today's society, people will believe it more if you have more followers. And
people will believe it at scale because of social media.
Yeah.
Especially. That is that is what pisses me off. Like what we were talking about last night. Like followers and basically like the interaction you're getting from social media giving you like credibility. Because like it's so invalid. It's so invalid. It's just not real.
Well, and the other crazy thing too about social media is like I could go on my personal Instagram account right now. I could go onto the internet. I could spend a few $1,000s and I could come out the other end with 200,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't gain any of those followers, but that number means something to people. When they click on my profile, if they see 200,000 followers, they're more inclined to listen to what I have to say.
Of course, and I would do that too.
Absolutely. And I'm guilty of that as well.
Totally.
But that's why I have, throughout COVID, before we got the vaccine and stuff, that reading peer-reviewed, I did not believe a single thing that I saw unless I could scroll to the bottom of that and see that it was peer-reviewed and that, at least a number of universities had studied it.
Well, that's great that you were
and
doing
written
that,
on it.
because not everyone was.
No,
and not everyone is.
The problem is that we've developed this narrative that everything is so, it's like we were talking about the news. Everything's so polar, and it's like they're trying to push a narrative. But science is just not that.
Yeah, science is trying to get to the objective truth. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's what they're trying to do.
Absolutely. And so, I would get in these Facebook arguments with people, and they would,
Jesus Christ.
it was awful, and they would send me these links from Fox News and all these different news sources, and I would.
You ever send them back a peer-reviewed
I would
study?
find peer-reviewed studies.
They were probably like, dude, this isn't a credible source of information.
Exactly.
And you're like,
that's the response that you get, or people would, there was one time, I can't even remember what the topic was at this point, but it was COVID related, and I shared a peer-reviewed study that had come out of UCLA. And the response that I got, it was from some of my friends from back in South Dakota that I grew up with. And the response that I got was, you really trust something that came out of California? And it's like, sure, California is a very liberal state. It's democratic. But the idea that just because a college institution is based in that state, it discredits their information is flabbergasting to me. It's like,
but it's also so freaking frustrating trying to figure out how to find like good like sources with actual credibility, because it's on one hand, it seems like it's almost impossible to trust anything you're getting.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, even in that sense, like where I have been trying to read peer-reviewed scientific research, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
Because anyone can post anything they want on the internet. So you type in something about COVID, you have to stream through this layer of shit, multiple pages, before you can even find a peer-reviewed source. That becomes a job in itself.
And it's like, this is kind of going on a thing, but like the internet, like I wasn't around when the internet was like first being invented, but like what my idea of what it was, like for the people that understood it or like saw the potential in it, like ideally it would be this like wonderful place where everyone could share their opinion and maybe collectively form some type of like slightly more objective truths, because you're looking at it from so many different angles. You're able to see it like a more comprehensive idea of what's actually going on in the world. But people are like, human beings are manipulative, power hungry. Like they're selfish. Like, I mean, they're not all bad, obviously, but like,
No, but everybody wants to be right.
It's a game. People want to be right. Like they're playing this. Like it.
Yeah.
And now what are you supposed to do with it? Now that it's so big and so out of control and so unregulated, it's like this wild west of people just like fighting. And at least what it seems to me.
Oh, that's
removed from it.
That is absolutely what it is. Mm-hmm. And that's.
It's like, what do you do from there? It's already so untamed.
I feel like there's always been a certain level of that happening everywhere, especially in our country, because of freedom of speech and things like that. But I do think that's one of the things that social media has brought to the forefront, and I think that's just seeped into our everyday life. You know, everyone feels like they're, you know, they know more than they actually do because they've seen someone talking about it somewhere. Where there was a time where it was like, I'm not qualified to speak on this, you know?
100%, I know.
And that's sort of the crazy thing to me about COVID and everything, is that none of these people, they're all putting out their opinions, and none of us are.
They're not okay. Well, I don't know if this is exactly what you're going to say, but none of the opinions, they're repeating what they've heard. They're not original, thoughtful like diagnoses of the actual problem.
No, and none of us are qualified to even speak on it.
They're regurgitated pieces of information that they've sucked in from.
This was a medical problem. Unless you have medical training, you're not qualified to speak on it. Yeah.
It's like if you're shitting on someone that you've never met before, you're like, oh yeah, they're a horrible person. They're whatever you're saying. Like, no, you can't make that claim because you haven't, like, maybe your friend said something and maybe that's slightly better data. It's all about finding good data. And there's so much garbage out there, and people are constantly consuming it, and they think that it's good.
It's like the idea that that our voting system is flawed in some way, and that whenever somebody votes for something and it doesn't go their way, the automatic thing to jump to is like, the voting system's flawed.
Yeah, because the people are selfish and they didn't get their way.
But
so
then those things are studied, and there's been the majority of the consensus, other than like right-wing, you know, nuts out there.
No, people would only disagree if they lost.
Yeah, and there is absolutely no proof to show that our voting system is flawed in any way.
It's like the most childish, easiest argument to make. We lost. The game was rigged.
Exactly. It's the same thing as losing as a child. It's like playing Marco Polo, and you get touched and you get angry and you're like, your eyes were open.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing, just on a larger scale.
And then, like, when people give some credibility, that people who are, for whatever reasons, somehow credible, and people agree with that, then people are like, then they point to that person, and they're like, they agree with me. And you're like, but no, they don't have any right either, because they're not a doctor. They can't make any claims about COVID because they don't know anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone in this country is we all go to school to get qualification for something, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to go in, if I have a plumber come to my house, I'm not going to go into the kitchen and question everything that he's doing to fix my leaky pipe.
Yeah, you have to, like, that's the problem with credibility. Like, you have to kind of be able to trust in people. But it has to be, like, valid. It has to be valid trust. Like, if a plumber comes in your house, you want to believe that they know how to fix your pipes better than you do.
Yeah, they have training. They have training to do that. That's why you hired them. That's why they're there.
You can keep going. hard to
I have to pee too.
it's hard to make sense of any of it because it's so chaotic. I know, it's like so perfect. At the you just get a little bit at the beginning on the thing, but then as soon as you're set from there on out.
I know. At least if you're short, I guess.
Yeah.
If I were like 4 inches taller,
yeah, you would be having issues. You're like, yeah, short people rock. I agree. Dude, you're way more comfortable on a plane. That's like, I don't know. I don't know how exactly to like keep going from here, but like, I like learning because it makes me feel like I'm like kind of better able to contribute in general. Because like if you aren't taking in all those opinions, then you're like then you're clearly just misinformed in some way because you're lacking the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
Like you have to see big picture shit.
And I think and everyone's right to their opinion. I think the most toxic thing that you can do is shut someone down from having that opinion.
But then, like, what if their opinion is actually causing
harm,
damage?
That's when it becomes a different thing, right? But
how
that's
do you
why,
handle a situation like that?
And that's why things like the coronavirus or something that's like very serious, I don't feel like we all need to feel like we deserve to have a voice in this. You know, there are certain things
like,
where it's like,
why do you want a
leave it to
voice so bad? Like,
that's the other. I mean, I don't know if there's even an answer to that.
Like, why do you want a voice so bad when you're not informed and you're kind of not really even involved in the issue? Yeah, you're like a human being, so you're going to be affected by whatever it is. I'm not even talking about corona, just whatever it is. But like, if you're not informed, why would you even open your mouth?
Yeah, I don't think there's even an answer to that.
Like, you wouldn't. Like,
and that's something that I don't think you see happen in other places that aren't, driven by this sense of wanting to be right. And I think that just comes with privilege. I don't think...
Interesting.
I don't think that if you were to go to a place like a third world or even a second world country, someplace that isn't well developed, you're not going to see people arguing about such trivial things.
Because they're fighting for their lives?
Yeah. Because there's more
important things
to
going
worry
on.
about.
Yeah.
They're focused on themselves. They're focused on where the next meal's going to come from.
Yeah.
They're focused on shelter.
Yeah. It's like we have all this free time.
And we've gotten all these things,
all this privilege,
in plenty.
Uh-huh.
And so we've got nothing better to do than tell a doctor that their diagnosis is wrong.
Yeah.
But I will say, on a bright note, I see a lot of promise in younger generations, in your generation and younger.
Why?
I think that we have really gotten back to a place where people are more focused on. I mean, there is the social media aspect and everything that we've talked about, right? And the internet, and anyone can feel like they're right to a certain extent. And I think that one of the things that's negative is that with age, you feel like you know more. We've seen it time and time again where the older generations always think less of younger generations. The elders. Yeah, they always think less of the younger generations. I've been here longer than you. I know better. I used to hear that from my dad all the time. We'd get in arguments about things that I'd be studying in college, and his comeback was always like, I've been around a lot longer than you, son. And I think that we're starting to get to a place where, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people my age, I'm welcoming of younger generations because they're coming into the world right now with all these things going on. There's more happening. They're more in tune with trying to figure things out, and they want to see a brighter future for themselves. I think there was a long time where everyone was just kind of stagnant. It was just kind of the same thing in the United States, where it was like, go to school, get a job, do the whole family thing, white picket fence. We're seeing people go longer without having children. It's not like you graduate high school, you get married, you start having kids, sort of thing. We're seeing people that want to focus on their lives more so. We're seeing a shift in where people are more interested in society as a whole. We're starting to stand up for things, equal rights. We're starting to see younger generations grow up knowing about the LGBTQ plus umbrella, everyone that falls under that umbrella. It's becoming more normalized. We still have a long ways to go, but I think that...
Where do we need to go? What more is there to do?
Well, I think it differs from region to region.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. Like, you can't make these sweeping generalizations because they're true in one place and not true in another.
Oh, and it's absolutely
like where I live, like people. I guess I can't really speak because this is clearly an opinion, and is not based in. But like from what I've seen, people are accepting. And they really don't care. They just like want everyone to like chill. But in other places, I realize that that's not the same.
No, and as someone that grew up in South Dakota and Montana, and now I live in Portland on the West Coast.
Pretty polar.
Complete polar opposites. And I'm surrounded,
in terms
especially
of,
in Portland,
politics and social outlook, and
I would say both.
Yeah.
But Portland is about as liberal as it gets.
Yeah.
Everyone has a fair chance to do whatever they want here, virtually. Whereas, in South Dakota, there are still, and if we go, in the deep South and things, there are still laws in place that prohibit people from being exactly who they want to be. I don't know if it's changed now, but I mean, even if we look back on like the Trump presidency and stuff, and the rights that he stripped the LGBTQ community of, not letting trans people be in the military, a number of things.
Why?
And
why would that be? Why would you not want a trans person to be in the military?
Well, his reasoning was that the medical costs of having trans members in the military would cause an exponential increase in the medical funds that we need to provide.
How many transgender people would be volunteering for the military? Like enough to create an exponential increase in military spending, and we already have so much money going into the military.
There are studies that
sure we could give
show
a couple of bucks to the transgenders.
That there has been much more money spent on erectile dysfunction in the military than on hormone treatment for trans members of the military.
Interesting. I would love to know how much money gets spent on erectile dysfunction, specifically for the military.
Yeah, there's a documentary series, a docuseries that's on Amazon Prime right now, and it's called Trans in Trumpland.
Huh.
And one of the episodes features I can't remember if it was a woman that transitioned into male. I think that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Who was a member of the military, and he was retired before Trump made these choices. But they show those statistics in that episode,
mm-hmm.
and I want to say that it was well below 1% of the medical costs of the military went towards trans members. It might have even been like 0.1% or something crazy. But they gave that statistic there that, it was a crazy number that has been spent on erectile dysfunction, and hormone treatment was so much lower than it, and
it's really interesting to like look at our allocation of resources.
It
because
is.
it tells you a lot about what we value and what we care about.
And I think that's why I see a lot of hope in the younger generation, is because a lot of it comes from fear, right? And before we've become more accepting of these different things, there was a great deal of fear that surrounded the gay community, for instance, with the AIDS outbreak.
Yeah, which was a narrative pushed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the misinformation that surrounded that entire thing. And we've seen these sorts of things happen, whereas now gay people have had more rights for a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
And what harm have we seen it cause?
Nothing, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And so we're able to, we've got more, the statistics on something like that have risen. So people like in your age group and younger are able to hear an older generation say something like, well, gays spread AIDS or something like that. You're able to go on the internet or do any decent amount of studying and see that, well, that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
AIDS is just as easily transmittable from male to female.
Yeah, but then you go on the internet and there are some sources that say, yeah, it is true.
Yeah, but
yeah, but I mean, yeah,
it's
I understand.
it's easier.
But
to,
it's like
to
I
weed
think
those
about that
sorts
when
of
you're
things out.
saying like you have all this hope for the younger generation because they're like smarter in some way. But like, didn't your generation reflect on the mistakes of the generation above you?
I think so, and I think it just gets better and better.
Yeah. So just over time, people are increasingly getting smarter, as you would expect.
Yeah, we're learning from the mistakes that we've made, and I think
hopefully,
and I think by the time like your brother is in his 50s, hopefully there will be so many
37 years from now.
Yeah, and hopefully there will be so many studies on, part of all this back and forth. We've seen this happen before, like with AIDS. It was, kind of left wing, right wing. We had very liberal people that were, standing up with the gay community and saying it's not right to put this all on them. And then we saw right-wing people that were kind of pushing this, dataless information, just kind of fear-mongering. And I think that that's what's happening with the COVID crisis right now, is that we just don't have a whole lot of data. And the data that we do have is new, right?
Mm-hmm. And like kind of unfiltered a little bit, so it's just all coming in a big giant pile
But
mess.
there will be a time where it's set in stone.
That's
this
why
is
it's
what
so
the
much...
COVID virus was. This is what happened with it.
That's
this
why
is how we
hindsight is
solved
2020.
it. Yeah.
And like what? Well, this is something that I think about. Like when you think about like a lot of people in the past, like it seems like, I mean, clearly geniuses have like died unnoticed. That's a fact. But like a lot of smart people are now in the history textbooks. Like they did it. Even if they died and no one knew about them and they never got any recognition, like over time people collectively like looked at, like, just over time you're able to make better decisions. That's like why people instantly jumping to conclusions is such an insane way to go about it, because you just haven't had enough time to really sit with the information and look at the different perspectives and see what the truth is. You're getting a first snap glance at it.
And I would say that's the one positive of the rise of social media and things, right?
Yeah.
Is that things can be shared a lot quicker now.
And debate can happen, because the debate now
right when it happens.
Yeah.
As soon as something happens, there's a debate that's struck up about it. And I think that is beneficial.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it gives us more data to look back upon. Everything is so, I mean, it's kind of like with cancel culture and everything. Like, you can't really say whatever you want anymore, right? Because it's going to be put on blast in a matter of moments. And, there's negatives and positives to that, but I think the stream of data and the way that we're able to build statistics on these things is beneficial to us, especially to younger generations. Like, your brother's just going into high school, so he's not in a position to have a specific viewpoint on one of these things or make a change on it, but all of this data is coming into him every single day, and he's able to form his opinions based on these things in live time, as they happen. All the things that have been happening with race over the last year.
Okay, but it's like, how do people form opinions? People, like, most of the time, like Zach tells me stories about, like, kids in his class who are, like, ardent anti-mask people, like even at, like, the height of COVID, or, like, ardent Trump supporters, like, and it's clearly just because their parents were.
Oh yeah.
And, like, maybe I'm more liberal because you are, and my family is, and everyone else around me is, and I live on an island that is more liberal, and that if I lived in the deep south or wherever, in some
you're
place in Texas, like, it is your environment that forms you. Like you don't really have any control about it. And I guess that's another positive to social media, because you're not just stuck. But then again, it is, because you get sucked in these little echo chambers of ideas that get reinforced. Like, on your social media feed, if you're a liberal, you're getting curated content that is more liberal leaning. Like, if you're liberal, you're not getting fed conservative news sources.
No, you're not. And that's why I think it's more important than ever for you to seek out
do what you were
viewpoints doing from as many different sources as you can. And that's one of the, I see a lot of people that have said things about COVID and Donald Trump and these politics, and they're like, do some research. But research from where?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, research from a bunch of right-wing people that are doing the exact same research to try to prove a certain point, or do research from every spectrum of the conversation and then form an educated response to that. And
that's hard, but it's the only right way to go about it.
It's hard, but it's not impossible.
And it's also necessary.
Yeah. And I think that's, I hope that is what we push towards younger generations. It's certainly what I'll push towards my kids.
What specifically, and I think, if you had to sum it up in one word, like seeking out more perspectives to form a better picture of what's actually going on?
Yeah, I would say informed research.
Yeah.
Not believing the first bit of news that you see.
Yeah.
Not...
How reasonable of you.
Not taking...
Obviously you would do that.
Not taking that information and then typing it in word for word so you can read another article that gives you the same information. But viewing it from every single side. And I think that... I think one of the most important things that happened this year was that the George Floyd trial was televised, and that we could watch it day in and day out from both sides, and there would be things in the news that would say, like, oh, it was a good day for the defense today, it was a good day for the prosecution today. But if you took all that news out of it and you just watched it, and then you based your own viewpoint on that.
Raw data.
And, if your morality came into play there and you watched that, there was only one clear decision to be made. And I think that that's what needs to be done more and more. And I think what's good is that we're holding people accountable to their words more now. Right? So, like this entire conversation, we're talking about how we grew up in liberal families. Mine was a little bit split. I've definitely got some conservative members of my family some liberal. But I think that benefited me more than growing up in just a liberal family. I came out on the liberal side, but I made those decisions based on all the information that I was getting from everyone in my family, whether it was conservative or liberal.
Yeah. And
I think the idea that we're able to sit here as two liberals and say, when I watch MSNBC, I feel like they're pushing a narrative.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It's
to be able to recognize your own flaws.
And it's a liberal station, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where my hope in younger generations rises, is because we're no longer just believing everything that a certain side says.
Yeah.
It takes research to build an informed opinion on something. And that's all it is at the end of the day. Everything I've said now is just an informed opinion. I'm sure there's someone that's exactly my age that says there's no hope in younger generations, right?
Yeah.
But I just think that the more we're able to communicate about things and the more we're able to see multiple sides of things, the better. And I think that not so long ago there was it was like
it's almost like you had to take what you were given at face value and just either and believe it. You basically didn't have a choice. Like throughout this entire conversation, if I may bring it in a slightly different direction, or you can circle back however you want to do it. But like I'm thinking about, like, you're talking about like looking at this like more raw source of data, like unedited, like just the raw trial. Like through all of history, like the RCC, Roman Catholic Church, dominated pretty much all of European history. They were hegemonic. They were the ones controlling everything. Okay. Like the giant majority, like 99% of the people who were Christians were not able to read the Bible, this one text that the entire religion is centered around, because it was written in Latin and they didn't understand or speak Latin.
Right.
So all of those people that thought they were Christian didn't know what they were being fed. It was the priests' interpretations of the Bible that they were like being forced into.
Right, and now we're to a point where even people that follow Christianity doubt certain things that the Roman Church has done, right?
Yeah, because
there are Catholics that don't stand by everything that the Catholic Church has said in the past, because we're forming our own opinions on it, and we're taking the data from the history.
Yeah. And it's like you're not just getting those priest's words. You're also hearing the news, whether it's right or wrong. You're also hearing social media, whether it's right or wrong. You're also like seeing these scientific studies, whether they're right or wrong. Like at least you're getting more. You have more things exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. It's like it all circles back to like just having more ways to look at like the world.
Absolutely. I think one of the most like powerful things that's happened since I've been alive is the Pope coming out and saying that gay people are welcome in the Catholic Church. I mean, mind-blowing, right? Because, like you're saying, for so long, it's been
burned at the stake.
Yeah, and it's been viewed that that's what the Bible says, right? And it took the rise of gay people being more accepted in the world for us to realize they're not different than a straight person. Your sexuality has nothing to do with who you are
or what color your skin is, or any variable that makes you different.
Absolutely.
And it's like
you're just as welcomed as anyone else is.
Thank God, finally, because just more perspectives.
Yeah.
More perspectives.
And
especially if we can get those people educated in like a useful way, because like you can say like someone's educated and maybe they went to like a super like I don't know they went through some type of education process that was super biased. It's like education has to be like exactly what we're talking. Like the point of education should be exposing you to as many possible ways of looking at the world, and you being.
And that's
able to
the
come
other
up with your
great
own
thing that we're seeing, like with this cancel culture, is like you can no longer have, you know, a professor that's teaching politics or religion or something like that have one of these like specific viewpoints on one of those things.
Yeah.
It's not allowed.
Yeah.
And they won't last long if they're preaching their opinions on people. It needs to be like, you know, there needs to be, I hate to keep saying statistics, but there needs to be statistics and like a founded basis behind the information that you're passing on to
It's
other
almost
people.
like the more perspectives give like a more give more checks and balances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's, and even with science, that has happened over time.
Yeah,
because we're challenging different
even scientific
theories.
studies are still like narrative driven because they're written by human beings.
Absolutely.
And we are narrative creatures. Like it's impossible to get like escape from it almost. Like that's why I love what you were saying, like the raw data. So like the, I don't know like how to say it, but the perspectives can debate themselves once they're put out there. And it's like if you just put out like the most basic things, and then they go off and fight in the little robot wars or whatever you're imagining these things as, like that, it'll naturally form a hierarchy of ideas, and you'll look at the ones at the top more, but like that will be a more credible source of information, like because they went through this like serious process of fighting to see which one comes out on top.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I like think like the whole world's like a big like the social hierarchy, like depending on what it's found on, like it's like money and power, and like before it was just land and connection to nobles. Like there's always been this like kind of triangular hierarchical thing of where the people at the top had the most influence and the people at the bottom kind of just like had to go along with it.
Right.
And like now at least like I mean it's still super money driven. Like the real world is money driven.
We're starting to listen to
the rise of the masses is given more voice because of social media. Like before, all the peasants couldn't unify together. They couldn't get a cohesive message together because there was no way
anyone that wants to can get their opinion out there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's just up to the
and then
rest
it's a
of
fight
us.
from there.
Yeah.
And like a good fight, it should be a fight. Like I'm using fight loosely. Like it's like a competition. It's like a validity contest to see like what actually rises to the top.
Yep.
It's like hopefully you would want the most true thing to rise to the top.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Ideally. But then there are so many things that like stop that from happening.
Yeah, and there's and that's where wealth comes into play in a lot of circumstances. Like, I mean, we could talk about a number of things, but climate change and like oil companies.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a decent amount of studies that show that certain things are contributing to climate change.
Yeah, it's
and
like
things like that.
Accepted as fact.
And that's where money can ruin things for sure. So the further that we move away from viewing profit as more important than truth, the better we are.
Yeah, and that seems almost like fairly unlikely.
Yeah, but I don't think it's impossible. I think we're a long ways off, but I think that's one of the hopes that I have for every generation that comes, is that we learn from our mistakes. Like you said,
slowly
hindsight's
get better.
20/20. We can look at the mistakes that we've made in the past, and we can do better.
Yeah.
And that's all you can really hope for.
Yeah. Like last night when we were in the hot tub, like I said something like, yeah, but can't you just fix that with money or something like that? And I think it was like, I guess we were talking about the government, and I guess like you can't change the government with money, but you can change other things with enough money.
Absolutely.
Like you can change the world with enough money. Like I get that Spencer instantly argued against that because like obviously like private wealth is nothing.
It takes,
and you need billions and billions and
ton of
billions
money.
and billions and billions of dollars to actually make any change.
But that's why it's important to vote, and it's important to put the right people in power.
That's another thing. Why doesn't everyone vote? I mean, I guess every person that doesn't vote probably has their own reason to.
I think that just over time people feel helpless.
But that's why you're given a vote.
Absolutely. But it's, I don't know. It's kind of just a falsity that's been pushed is that, like, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day they're going to decide what they want to decide, and it's money driven and things like that. But that's one thing that in this last election we saw. And then unfortunately, like here in Portland, there was a huge percentage of people that voted for this last presidency, because there was kind of this drive, right? And then we had our local election shortly after that, and the number just plummeted.
Yeah, no one, yeah.
And that's, I think, something that we need to start pushing in our schools is the importance of voting, and not only voting every 4 years, but voting in the primaries, voting in your local elections, because at the end of the day, with the democracy that we've created, that is the only way to get something done, is to put the right people in the right places.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I've been trying to figure, I guess, just grapple with, in this fucking weird life we live, all right, it's basically like two parts. The first part is the world is too complex to understand, random, out of your control, absurd. And then it's what are you supposed to do in response to that? How are you supposed to live knowing that? It's are you supposed to hide from it? Or it seems like you're almost scared to step, because every way you walk could be wrong, or could lead to a trap, or could magically sweep you off to someplace else. It's you have to understand that, and then still choose to accept the world and try to make informed decisions, given all that. You can't renounce the world once you find out that it doesn't make sense. That's the thing.
Yeah, and you also can't give up every time something happens that isn't in your favor.
It's expecting the unexpected gives you some sort of control, but also I see over time that if that were to continue to happen to you, you would be what point is there to vote, to do anything, to go to work, since it's so out of my control and I could lose the job and the stock market could crash tomorrow. Why participate in this world if all that stuff could go wrong? That is the definition of discipline. Knowing all that, and then still choosing to go out and vote, and still go out and voice your opinion and search for the truth and be practical and try to make the world a better place, given what you know about how almost impossible it is to actually make that happen.
Right. And that's why in the most recent local elections, there were a number of different policies and bills to vote on for funding for schools and things like that.
Okay.
And if I were to make those decisions purely on a fiscal basis, right? I don't have more money to spend every single year. I barely get by, I pay my bills, but I still voted yes on all those things, even though are my taxes going to go up? Yes. But the point of that is to provide more kids with the opportunity to get education and hopefully better our world so that my children have a better world to live in.
Yeah. It's you have to frame it so that you think that helping other people will in turn help you. That is the...
And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And that's great, because it's true.
Yeah.
Really, people see, are you doing this? You coming on my on this show? If you needed me to go pick up something tomorrow, I don't know. If you do something good for someone, most of the time they will have some sort of feelings of reciprocity towards you.
Yeah, and that's why I think the best way to live your life is to not make decisions purely based on self and what's going to benefit me in this situation, but what's going to benefit society in this situation.
And you have to frame it what
you have to think of things in a societal frame point, because at the end of the day, you might make things better for yourself in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
but
You don't have the foresight to see what will happen in the long term given this decision.
no.
Yeah. So like
Exactly.
making that more like thinking bigger will just lead you to make more like clear decisions. I mean, like if you look at something like so small, you're only looking at a tiny, like if you're only thinking about the next week or like the next year of how it's going to affect your business costs, you're not looking at 50 years from now when the ocean comes through and sweeps your home away.
Absolutely.
Like you have to think big picture. It's the only way to solve any type of problem or interact in any like logical or thorough way in this world.
Yeah, and that's wrapping it all back around to like our business and planning for making plans for if there were another pandemic or something like that.
Which is so smart, and everyone
one of the
should be
things
doing
that
what
we're
countries should be doing. Everyone.
Yeah, and that's one of the options that we're weighing right now is that we're looking at a building that there's studies that show that at some point, it could be 100 years from now, it could be in the next couple years, there will be a major earthquake along the West Coast, and it will strike Oregon. And that's something that, China and Japan, they've learned greatly from their natural disasters, and they put these things in place in their buildings, their ordinances now, where they've got to have a certain amount of like earthquake protection and things like that. And that's something that we haven't done here on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of buildings in Portland that if there was even a minor earthquake, they would crumble. And so that's one of the things that we're talking about in our business plan as well, is like we're looking at a couple different locations. One was built in 1913, and it's one of those examples where if there were any sort of natural disaster here in Portland, that building would crumble.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cheaper, right? It's less. It's less to pay. The rent is less because there's more renovations that need to be done. But then we're looking at another building that was built in 2005, and it's got earthquake protections because Portland has recently put those ordinances in place too, where buildings have to be built with, I mean, I'm not a contractor, so I don't know the details.
So you're weighing all of these opinions.
Yeah,
and
it's like
how far. It's like how far out do I need to think?
Yeah, do we pay $10 per square foot less per year, or do we bump up our rent prices so that if something like that happens, our building's still standing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a pretty like large thing to think about, because in reality, if something happens to Portland, it's going to wipe out a vast amount of the city. So, we're a bar music venue. People aren't, regardless of what happens, people aren't going to really be going for a bar. But we're taking care of that space, and maybe it could be used as a shelter if something like that happened. I just think it's important to think about things from, like we said, a grander scheme, a long-term projections, as opposed to just thinking about the here and now, because
then if you didn't and the earthquake comes, then you'd be fucking screwed.
Well, and especially when you get to my age, you can't help but to think about things without thinking about them in terms of, I mean, if you have any sort of morality, you think about them in worst case, but you also think about how are we going to leave this place in good position for our children? What's the point if I save a little bit of money every year on rent and maybe make more money in turn, but in doing that, I'm leaving less of a space for my children.
Mm-hmm. I definitely
and that
understand.
and buildings that talking about buildings, that doesn't really make sense, but
yeah, no, I definitely understand that.
But
you're not talking necessarily about
but taking that logic and putting it into
applying
policies,
it to, exactly.
like, taxes to give our kids better schools, taxes to
about the environment, just for
about the
instance.
environment.
Like such a long-term problem that isn't like hitting us right now,
And
except
that's-
it is already, the heat waves here
It is,
and in Arizona.
but that's one of the grossest things that I hear people say are things like, yeah, well, I'm not going to live to see that.
Yeah. This, well,
And
I don't know how
that's I hear a lot of people talk about the environment that way, where it's like, well, yeah, but the projections for that are 200 years from now. I'm not going to see that. No, but your kids' grandchildren
Bro,
are.
you're the same as everyone else. Like,
Exactly.
everyone still has a
And-
conscious, like, it's the same.
And we
like,
are
you're
nowhere close to being done with the population of the world, right? Yeah. And so it's like, take a morality check and make these decisions.
Yeah, but no one's forcing you to take a morality check.
Exactly.
That's the problem. It's like it's laziness and thinking it's not your problem. To me, you could look at it in a way like it's like a fear of death kind of thing. Like you don't want to think of anything that happens after your death because that's such like a strange, like weird topic. Like this is what
It's
what
very
me-
taboo.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like it's literally the most universal thing. It's a thing that happens to every single thing that has ever taken a breath. It dies, and yet we never talk about it. You never talk about death.
And, to a certain extent, it's like, if you don't want to think about it that way, then think about past generations.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the things that we're facing now with climate change and things. What if previous generations would have thought a little bit more into the future?
Like, can you have the discipline and the creativity to think about a kid? Say we make it from to the year 2200 or however long 2200 years is from now. Like, you have to have the discipline to think in that little kid's foot that is like drown. Like, there's already like giant, like Indonesia's going underwater. Like now it's happening, but like we don't see that. Like you need to see that that's happening right now. But also, like, if you're so selfish to think of your own kids, realize that they're gonna be facing those same problems, like serious problems, and you could help it. And that people right now are facing the things that your kids are gonna face. Like any way to make it like more visceral for people is good, because maybe it'll activate that sense of morality that you were talking about.
Absolutely. And I think that's why history is just having
The best.
yeah,
The best.
having a written thing that you can look back on and see this is the way that people did it, and learning from it is so important. And I think that's where a lot of people, kind of miss the boat, is that we're so focused on our day-to-day lives. And, rightfully
so. Yeah.
It's a hard world to live in.
Yeah. You have
ahead.
to survive.
It's a difficult world to live in for that reason.
Yeah.
So let's try to make things better so
Yeah.
that it doesn't just get perpetually worse.
Yeah. You just nailed why I love history so much,
Yeah.
and why
It's
I love
great.
studying history. It's fantastic.
I love reading about things.
It gives you, like, if you do it well, it gives you like a pretty accurate blueprint of this world you're living in. Like, obviously now, like the world you're living in is impossible to understand in the here and now, because it's happening live, like, and because it takes time to think clearly about things. Like, you can't it's so difficult to make like accurate claims about the world happening right now because there's so little time. But because studying history, it's like we're the same people over and over again, and just put in different situations. So like when patterns pop up, like when you see that like kings are like calling on the word of God, and then like you see like a politician calling on like the words of the people, or some like made up like kind of lofty thing, like maybe that's not the best example, but like you see these patterns, and like if you're in tune enough to take the information that you've gathered from the past, looking at the patterns, the way people have done it right and done it wrong, like maybe you'll be able to apply it in a useful way to the here and now that would have been impossible if you had not done that research before.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like looking back on, failed civilizations that have happened over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's look at those. Let's learn, why did they fail?
Yeah.
Let's not make the
Yeah.
same decisions that they made.
Definitely.
And it's easy for us to just be like, oh, well, that was a long time ago. We've
Yeah,
got
they
all
didn't
this
have the
technology.
technology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all these sorts of things. But we're still human beings.
Yeah, you're still the same people.
They were still driven by the same things that we're driven
They
by.
still needed to fucking eat.
Yep.
And sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And have some water.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. It's those things. That's when Robert California says, there is no product. It's just sex.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you nailed it. We're the same. Like, that's why so many of the things, like, the people think the world today is so different, but it's like the world is different, but we are all the same, and we make up the world. Like, there's that social part of the world that is almost more real at this point than like whatever isn't the social part of the world, like whatever you would call that.
Yeah, and the problem is that we're such a capitalist society, but it's like, let's not create markets for things that don't need to be put into a marketplace.
I remember. What was that about?
What were we talking about the
Something
other day
like
then?
that. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about, it was back to the business thing. We were talking about how...
the liquor licenses.
Liquor licenses.
Yeah.
Some states put a cap on it, and then the only way to obtain one is to buy them from another individual.
Okay.
So, for instance, here in Oregon, a liquor license is under $500. In the state of Montana, they've reached their quota for liquor licenses.
And now they cost...
So now to get one, you have to buy it from a private seller who's obtained one. They can cost anywhere upwards of $250,000.
Insane.
And that taken to a grander scale, like what we're talking about, there are certain things that's creating a market for something that shouldn't have a market.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that with a lot of things in society, where we put a dollar value on things or a quota on things, and we say, we're going to make it a lot harder for that to happen for you. And that's like, it's like rights for trans people. They're human beings. We can't put a cap on what they're able to do in their lives, because even though they're experiencing something that we might not be experiencing as, straight males, mm-hmm. that doesn't mean that their experience is any less important to society.
Interesting.
Or that they can't provide something that we can't.
Yeah. That whole, like, when the conversation we were talking about, like, with money and inflation, and just, like, imagine if we all, like, came to the collective realization that money was just nothing. It's just
insane.
If
there was, like, an equal distribution of wealth.
But also, like, if like right now everyone just realized that this green paper didn't have any value, because it only is valuable because we all trust in it.
Well, at this
point, and so
point,
if everyone lost trust in it,
we've done ourselves in too far now, though. If we did that, it would be a complete collapse of civilization.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so what you just said was that the complete collapse of civilization would occur if we saw the truth.
Yeah, because we've done ourselves in too far.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like the only thing that we can do now is chip away at that, but in our form of democracy that we've created.
And it's also like, you don't want to chip away at it too much, because like I'm thinking of like a big mountain that it is, and if you start chipping away at the bottom, like that thing could topple over without you even knowing it, and you think you're making progress. It's like, I think I can connect it. My dad loves this like metaphor. Donald Trump is taking a piss on you, and he's telling you it's rain, and you think it's piss, but then like over and over again he keeps telling you it's rain, so you start believing it's rain. It's like
that's such a John quote.
It's like over time, like that idea of that money has value has been so reinforced. Like, now is it even possible? Like, now that it's like ideas get so built up, like that's why it's so hard to change. Like, I think Joe Rogan has this good metaphor of like a lot of these ideas, especially if they're old, like because all ideas have their foundation in old shit. But like if they're old and have been debated and thought about by a lot of people, it's just like giant ship, like naval ship of ideas like that length. And think about how hard it is to completely change directions of a massive boat versus like a little dinghy or something. You'd be able to spin around and go back, but a massive naval ship like that could take a long time to turn.
Exactly.
That's like why change is so hard, because it's so built up and so solidified.
Yeah.
It's like what do you make of it? It's like how do you want that process to go faster? Then it's like maybe you were in the right direction before and you turn the ship around and you're actually supposed to be going the other way, and now you have to. It's so much to think about, and it's like it can't be one. Like it's like, is it one person's job? Is it everyone's job? How do you form like groups of people to think about it logically if everyone has different opinions and they're all informed? Like how are you supposed to make any sense of this world as like that's what we were talking about last night. Like I was like, yeah, I still have this like childish sense in me, like that I'm gonna be able to change the world one day, and Megan was like, yeah, like you'll lose it, so basically.
Yeah.
And I was like okay,
but if
like,
everybody didn't lose that,
then nothing, like I feel like no one would be telling everyone to change the ship.
Yeah.
And it's like no one would be like so eager to, because they would be like, oh, I don't have any control. Like that's like the most offensive part about nihilism, is that you think you genuinely don't have any like actionable potential. But you do. Right. Even though you're out of control, you still have some ability to
and that's why
interact with this world.
It's so important for us to learn from our mistakes and try to make positive change before it's too late. Yeah. It's like, to equate it to something else, it's like drug addiction, right? It's like if you try heroin and you are able to very quickly realize that this is very addictive, I like this, learn from what you know about heroin addiction and get yourself help right away. It's like I have friends that have never drank alcohol in their lives, but they have alcoholism in their families, and they attend AA meetings even though they've never even really drank. But they've seen the damage that it's caused in their family, right? Mm-hmm. And so from like a societal standpoint, we can do that exact same thing, where it's like with this pandemic, if we can all view how horribly we've handled this situation, the next time it comes around, we can do a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that's all you really hope for generation after generation, is to view the mistakes of the generation before them, and say, all right, this is where they went wrong. Mm-hmm. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like my whole thing with psychedelics is like, I think that I'm going to like them. And I feel like I'm going to be able to get some real like meaningful value out of them, because I've done a bunch of research about it. Like, I know all the positive effects. Like, I've talked to all of my friends super in depth about them, and I know like I still don't have the actual experience of doing it, but like my gut instinct, like I have a feeling that they're gonna be useful to me in some way, and like whatever journey I'm on, like whether it's like trying to find the truth or whatever fucking bullshit I'm saying, like about mm-hmm. what I actually want to do, like I feel like they're gonna in some way like assist me, but like I know so much, like I feel like I know so much about it that they're always going to be there for me. So it's not like I'm jumping at the first opportunity to do it.
Well, and both of us are very similar in the sense that, we've had addiction and things in our family before.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I always kept in the mind throughout my experiences with psychedelics and drugs. Mm-hmm. Is I've seen the things that they have done to my parents. Mm-hmm. And same with alcohol and everything. And so I've always had this driving voice in the back of my head to always do those things in moderation and never to get too carried away with it as much as I might have the desire to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's learning from the mistakes of the past. That's learning from literally my family generations that have come before me, and seeing the damage that it's caused them, the damage that it's caused me as I was younger, and not wanting that same thing for my kids. And that's like the thing that people say all the time about how I feel like so many people that have children and stuff, they're like, I'm not going to make the mistakes that my parents did, you know, or I'm going to take the good from my parents and not the bad.
But then how often do people go in with that intention and then just do the opposite or fall to whatever victim? Because didn't their parents at once say that same thing about their parents and then fell into the same trap?
You would think so.
Well, I think
I think that sometimes, like with drug addiction, I think it comes from different places. I've had friends that have come from very strict families, from parents that have never dabbled in anything, and that their parents were so strict about them being the exact same way as them, right?
Yep.
And then that's driven them to go.
Yeah, it's like almost like in
to
retaliation.
to the extreme
like,
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a place where I really admire your parents, is because they have experiences with those things, and they could very easily say, this was my experience with drugs and alcohol, don't do it. If you do it, it's going to be terrible for you, you know? But they're able to see the hindsight of the damage that could possibly do. And that you could end up taking it to the extreme or something. So they're very open about sharing their experiences with you.
I feel like it's all about the open, honest conversations.
It is.
That is the way forward. Like, that's why I love this so much, because it's like, and you're not trying to push a narrative on me. Like, you're sharing your honest ideas.
That's the biggest thing that I've taken away from my dad. My dad has struggled with alcoholism, cocaine addiction, a number of things, but he's never tried to hide it from me. Not that he's like,
yeah, I understand what you mean.
He's never tried to hide his
issues
with it. And I appreciate that, but he's also been very honest with me with, just because I made these mistakes doesn't mean that you're going to make the same mistakes. And I'm not going to tell you that you can't do these things, that you can't drink alcohol or, dabble with drugs and things like that. But this is my experience with it. This is where I did it wrong. This is how I took it too far. And these were the circumstances to that.
That sounds like raw data.
Yeah, and that allows you, it makes you see that, it makes you feel like your parents have a level of trust in you. And when you're young and you feel like you're being treated like an adult, it means more than anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's all you want when you're young, is to be treated like an adult. You don't want
always
people
want to be an older. Like, I remember being 14, 15. Like,
I
thought it was the coolest shit in the world
things.
being with high schoolers or being with older kids.
Exactly.
Like, because it's just like, it's kind of like that elder thing, like just like more years, but like it's the narrative thing too. Like, they're supposed to be smarter, but like if you really can learn from all the people that came before you, that is like what the central thing that we keep coming back to, like more perspectives, honesty, like learning from your mistakes. Like, if that could become some sort of like universal law, universal truth, I can't even imagine what the world would be like. Because how many of the mistakes are we making today?
And that can be applied to anything, right?
Yeah.
Everything comes from something, and you can look back and view, all right, how was it done then? How have people done it? How do I want to do it?
That's why I love books in general, because it basically, like, I think about like, or the guy who Dan Harmon, the guy who like writes and creates Rick and Morty. I saw a video about like how he comes up with like plot structures and stuff. He's like, basically, all right, throw your characters in some type of wild situation, and then see how they react to it. And like basically that's what all books are, like all like fiction or literature or whatever. Like it's these characters getting thrown into situations that have some grounding in real life, that are in some way, even if they're fighting a dragon, you can relate them back to like your day to day, like a fight with a boss or like or something. It's like everything has some grounding in reality, and you can actually learn from it if you take it in. Like it's so cool to see. Like I've actually done the things that some of the things that I've read seen people do, and it actually works because like it worked for them, or like it did something wrong and like you do the opposite. Like it's this it's like this vast resource of like seeing different situations, seeing how people see it,
different perspectives.
Yeah, it's seeing how people reacted to it, seeing how it went for them, and then seeing your perspective, see how it lines up, seeing how it differs, and then changing your reactions, changing your actions, and kind of modifying it based on the information that you've taken in about whether that person's thing went well or wrong.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be able to do that.
It is. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
cool to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it makes you feel less blind.
Yeah.
I feel like.
I think that is like, we have continued to come to that. That's like the moral of this conversation, is like taking in data and making decisions based on the data that you've collected.
Yeah.
But not going into anything blind.
Yeah.
Or rushed.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason to.
Yeah. Totally. It's like it's like this world is a gigantic cave that's just so dark, and you like have some little opportunities to like you have a tiny little dinky flashlight, like any spare batteries, anything you can use to bolster that flashlight to make you see a little bit better, you have to take advantage of, because there's not that many things that like will afford that flashlight better light. Like every single thing that's like the opportunity thing. Like I think a lot of successful people are just the people who knocked on the right doors and who took advantage of the opportunity when it came to them. It's like the successful people are the ones who like are actionable, the ones that actually like go out and do it. It's not the ones that think or like philosophize about all this, like maybe like a writer or some on-off things, but most about it's the people that take action.
Yeah.
And you can only take action with a flashlight in your hand.
And that's not to say that like if you do the right amount of research, you're going to make the right decision on anything either. Mistakes are just as important as making the right decision, right? And like even if we, like back on like the like drug sort of thing, like even though my parents have given me all their insight on the mistakes they've made, that's not to say that I haven't made mistakes myself, you know, or taken it to the extreme. But when I have taken it to the extreme, I've been able to go back and be like, it's like comparing sets of data, right? It's like, oh, yep, that was actually too far. They said it was too far. I experienced it. It really was too far.
And it's like sometimes you have to see that for yourself.
Yep.
Sometimes you need the punch in the face rather than like the soft talking to.
Yeah, a lot of times that'll teach you more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like, I mean, I could keep going on any single thing. So, yeah. But it's like I saw this one like YouTube. It was like a TED Ed YouTube video, and it was like, I forget exactly what it was, but basically it's like if you were blind, but you were like a researcher about colors, and you knew every single possible thing there was to know about colors, would you really know everything about colors because you've never seen them?
Wow, that's like super deep.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
Weird, right?
That's super weird.
Just because like you know so much about the like
problems. There are certain things that you have to experience to actually know about them.
But like, why is that? Just because like it needs to like hit home for you in some way? Like,
I think so. Yeah, it has to be. I mean, no matter how much you research things, I think that as human beings, we just learn more by like tangible effects.
Yeah, definitely. that's like whatever you are, audio, visual, whatever type of learner you are, you'll learn best from having it happen to you. Like if you make a mistake and then like you lose your house because of it, or or if you do something and you lose someone really important to you because of it, like
or a part of yourself.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, like if you, I don't know, we all have different values, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we can make decisions that completely, it's like, wow, I valued myself as being this type of person, and I just made a decision that completely went against those values. And it kind of makes you doubt yourself as a person for a second. Those are experiences that I've had with like drug use and stuff. It's like, wow, I've always said I would never do that because my parents did that and it hurt me, or something like that. Or like in relationships, like there have been things that, arguments I've seen my parents have or something, and it's like, I will never do that to my significant other. And then you find yourself in a circumstance and you're like, holy shit, I just did that to my significant other. And it makes you doubt yourself. But those are the types of things that I think make you a stronger person. It's like, it's the building blocks of becoming who you want to be. Like you could see somebody, like if you come from like an abusive family or something, you could see a parent like hit another parent or something like that. I've never experienced that, but I imagine you could see that.
And almost instead of learning from it, it gets like programmed into you in a way that like you would then go and do that. Like,
but then I think that, yeah, that moment of you crossing that line would be like the ultimate like eye opener of, wow, like this is what it was like for whoever you saw being abused. Like now I'm the abuser, the one thing I didn't want to become. And you can either learn from that and say never again and become a better person from it, or follow down the same footpath and become that person.
And that's learning from your mistakes.
Yep.
That's the whole fucking thing.
That's the thing.
I don't know. I think that's a pretty good spot to end
I think
on.
it is.
Sweet.
I'm starting to get
mosquito-y.
Mosquito-y.
Yeah.
Indeed. I've seen like multiple land on your forehead, and I'm like, oh god. I have so many bites, I'm sure.